All right, Jacob, we have officially done this. We have started our podcast.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. For people might not know this, but before we actually click the record button to start, um, we were contemplating how we're going to start this whole podcast and what is this going to be about and what's the format, topics, the whole shebang. And I think it's safe to say we just like talking to each other and we have no idea.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty fair assessment of the last 5 minutes that we just exchanged.
Mhm.
Just to kind of bring this up organically, see where this thing is going to take us, what it's going to be about,
Mhm.
and kind of go from there. But I think, just in previous conversations that you and I have had prior to tonight, I think we kind of just want to touch on any number of topics that
Mhm.
either one of us find interesting, whether it's stories or headlines that have come out or what's topical in the news in a given day or a given week, and just to be able to kind of freely exchange those thoughts. And I'm really interested in learning from you and your perspective. The interesting thing is, or at least I find it relatively interesting, is you and I don't know each other all that well.
I know.
Uh, and so that's it. It's a little scary, but it's also, I think, it's much more exciting than it is scary. And so we don't know each other all that well. We've known each other for 3-ish years, I think, because we met through church.
I was gonna say give them the context on how we met, so that we
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so we met through church. I had started playing drums at a church that Nelly was a team leader on, and it kind of started from there. So even though we've known each other for 3 years, we don't know each other very well at all, because just the nature by which your availability, my availability, and how often we actually got to interact over those last 3 years, you can probably count on two hands how many conversations you and I have actually had. And
But
so
I can say with the conversations we've had in the few times we've been back in the worship room, with the conversations we've had, I always found it very intriguing whenever I talk to you how 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 well versed you were with different topics, and how not so much comfortable, because sometimes we talked about issues that were uncomfortable. I know, because when we will start talking, everyone will be involved, and at a certain point it'll just be you and I. But I really, really appreciated those times, because in as much as I respect people's right to not engage in whatever conversations they don't want to engage in, I was very, very appreciative of the fact that you were willing to go into those uncomfortable places in front of other people and have those conversations, which kind of led me to thinking, this would be a good person to have a podcast with, because we didn't always agree on the point of views, during the conversations, but there was always a civility about our discourse.
absolutely, yeah. And so again, it took us 3 years to even get to the point where we would have a conversation about having a podcast.
Yeah.
And it all kind of started, just to contextualize it even a little bit more for people. We started having this conversation back in January and February of 2020,
Mhm.
and then the COVID pandemic sort of struck all of us, and you were traveling internationally with your band, and we were set to kick this thing off back in late March.
Yes.
And in late March was when the lockdown was just starting, and the social
Mhm.
distancing and everything was sort of shut down. And so it didn't lend itself to be a good time to even start the podcast. And, so now we're even doing it via Zoom. I mean, here we are, it's now July of 2020. So we're now, almost 4 months later in the process.
Yeah.
But we're really not any closer to having that sort of face-to-face contact or having the availability to do it.
Mhm.
But I think the the urge and the desire and the want from both of us to still do this has sort of pushed us to this place where we're meeting on Zoom, we're meeting remotely, and like I said, we're just interested in talking about ideas that, whether it's economically or psychologically or, biologically, scientifically, politically, religiously, philosophically, you name it. These are all topics that admittedly neither one of us, I would say, are subject matter experts in, field experts in. But I've been able to gauge from conversations with you, similar to me, it's almost an insatiable thirst for knowledge in these areas, constantly wanting to read up on these topics. I don't know if I mentioned it too, but politically even, I mean, it's a hot topic to talk about, but everything's politicized.
Yes,
everything is politicized, and
so true.
So it'll be just interesting to see our relationship develop over, and throughout this podcast. And so I'm looking forward to it.
And that's very well put, by the way, Jacob. I think what I found, because I've toured for the past 10, 12 years, I've traveled all over the country and sometimes outside the country. And you would think if someone asked me, if someone were to guess, what were some of your favorite experiences on tour or being a musician, if someone were to guess what they would probably guess something sensational like traveling the world, seeing different things, trying different foods, playing for big crowds, being on The Voice, and the whole shebang that comes with that persona of a rock star. And some of that is true, don't get me wrong, and I'm very appreciative of those experiences. But I find whenever I think back to my favorite experiences on the road, they're always tied to having beautiful conversations with people I had no idea of prior to going into their space. I find it fascinating that when I walk into a room with my guitar, I walk into a room full of total strangers and sometimes even doubters. And people sometimes perceive me with a filter that is clouded with their past and their experiences and their whatever. And they view me through that filter. It's not negative or positive. It's just what it is, right? And I love when I can slowly start to peel back those filters so they can see the real me and I can see the real them. And every once in a while, I will have a conversation after the show with somebody or some persons about whatever. And I find those experiences to be my favorite experiences. So I've known for the longest time that a podcast media was my favorite kind of media. And like you said, when we chose to start doing this in physical, proximity, that's when the whole pandemic and the quarantine, all hit us. And it's funny how God works in mysterious ways, because we can still do this remotely and still have this platform to just do what I believe comes natural to us, which is that curiosity and that conversation that we want to just engage in. So I'm glad that this is our first one we're doing. And yes, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, and I will do my very, very best not to talk a lot because I can just go. So I'm actually using this podcast as a way to teach myself how to be a better active listener.
That's good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
And I like the, how you were saying too, the best experiences were when you got to peel back those layers. And because we all will look at someone or something and we'll make presuppositions about them, and we'll make predetermined convictions about somebody based on how they look or what type of shirt they're wearing or if they have on a MAGA hat and and right. And so it's right. I mean, it's just true. For some people, they'll look at that as a symbol of an ally, and they'll look at that as a symbol of where that the two of those people are going to agree upon each other. But then some people look at that as just a symbol of hate. But you make those presuppositions, and we don't have to dive deep into the MAGA conversation, at least not just yet, although I'm sure at some point we'll get there. But the presuppositions that people make about people without having those deeper conversations, you leave so much out there on the table without learning anything about somebody. And you can walk away from these experiences without having learned anything of substance about a person, and you formulate opinions. And from those opinions, you'll start to stew in your mind, and from those original opinions that you'll make another layer of opinions about that person because you saw on social media that they liked a certain page or commented on a certain post. And so, the rabbit hole just runs infinitely deep. And like you said, without taking the time to have a 5 or 10 or even 15-minute conversation of any substance, you miss those opportunities. And all you end up left with is just those prejudgments, those preconvictions, those predeterminations of someone that most of them are probably baseless, and whether they are or not, you arrived at those conclusions baselessly. And so that's the importance of having conversations. And I look forward to the more conversations that you and I are going to have throughout this podcast where we disagree. And, I'm sure there'll be plenty that we agree on, but I'm looking forward particularly to the ones when we can have some disagreement and you show your side you show your opinion or how you view a topic, and it might be something that I hadn't previously considered, and vice versa. And because I just think it's so important to have these conversations and not just say, well, I'm on one side of the aisle and you're on the other side of the aisle, and so by dint of us being on those sides, we must hate each other, and it's just that's the message of the media today, is the aligning of sides. And if you're for one, then you're ardently opposed to the other, and it's just disgusting in my opinion.
If you're Black Lives Matter, you're anti-police. If you're anti-police, if you're pro-police, you're anti-Black Lives Matter. If you're MAGA, you are anti-liberty and progressive and whatever. Like, I'm not really deep into the politics, but the thing that's kept resonating in my head as you were talking was progress or digression is a choice, right? For example, myself, I'm trying to lose weight so I can get back into like tip-top soccer shape. And tip-top soccer shape is not regular good shape. It's really, really good shape because you're running around with 18 and 20-year-olds in the soccer field. You don't want to be embarrassed. So you have to be in good shape. But to be in good shape, you have to make a choice to go out and run and lift the weights and eat healthier and drink the water. And drink the water so that way you can, feel your best. So you have to actively engage. You have to actually make a choice and actively engage in that choice on a daily basis so you can improve. I find the same applies to people too. And sometimes the organism that we call the media right now, the organism that we call social media, to take it one step further, I think it's grown so fast that humanity doesn't know how to react to it. And because it's grown so fast, it's allowed possibly the worst sides of us to bubble to the surface. The worst parts being categorizing someone just based off, like you said, an item of clothing, a look, skin color, political affiliation, just categorizing them as that and placing them there, and they have no escape from that prison within your mind you've placed them in. But I think having these kinds of discussions and making the choice to say to yourself, it's not about winning the argument. It's about understanding the other person's point of view, and then having a marriage with my point of view and making a rational decision on what, based off our different points of views, is the most rational point of view for me moving forward. Keeping in mind, first of all, that the human being is worth something, and whatever you think and I think that strips you or me of our worth should not be, I don't know if I'm saying this well, should not be the prevailing course of action, whether it's through words or behavior or policy or law or whatever, that as long as we can preserve our humanity and our worth without, even if we disagree, but with our discourse and our behavior and our actions, it's okay. Let's have the discussion. Let's have the uncomfortable discussions. I think we need to have them now because this media is growing so fast that we cannot. It's growing so fast we can slow it down. And I think the best way to kind of get some kind of level ground is to just talk and listen to the other person and talk.
Mm.
And voice your opinions. Like, it's okay to have an opinion about something, but it's not okay for you to label me because of my opinions as something else. It's okay. So I could keep going on and on about this, but
no, and I'm enjoying it. It's just the piece that you spoke about, just even with social media, we're the living experiment of what social media is the impact that social media is gonna have on humanity. We've never had anything like it prior to, let's just say the early 2000s. I think maybe MySpace was around in the mid 90s, but I mean that's pretty much a foregone conclusion that everybody I think can chalk up to as, it's dead and buried, and nobody really attributes much success or failure on this human experiment to what MySpace has done. Mm. But I mean the major players out there right now: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. TikTok now is another huge up and coming one, but we have no idea the long-term effects that this is going to have on particularly the younger generations, because they're being introduced to this at such a young age. And I mean, you've seen just studies that have come out that have said, that the likes that you get if you post a picture, if you post a post about whatever it might be on Facebook or Instagram, there's an addicted need that goes on in the brain of these men and women, girls and boys, that it's equivalent to getting a dopamine response that you would get from drugs, right? And so no rational parent would allow their 14-year-old to constantly want to go back and get that hit of cocaine, right? Because they're addicted to it. And but what's going on in the brains of these kids, that's what it is. And you've seen just, suicidality rates that have increased among young people, anxiety, depression, and it's just formed popularity contests and cliques, and the anonymity of it too is another one that's just
so true, again, especially in Twitter.
So particularly unique. I mean, you can do it on Facebook too, but it's just the fact that you can hide behind a pseudonym, right? And you don't have to expose your name or anything, and you can just go and you can just beat down these people and just beat them into submission. And we don't know the effects that this is going to have on people, and so but it's basically a risk that we as humanity have said we're willing to take that risk at our own peril, right? And this is going to be at our own peril.
Probably not. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It could be peril if we are not actively watching for the signs and symptoms and addressing the problem. I think a big part of a cure is admitting you have a problem. And I think a lot of people, if you ask them about social media and if it's a problem, we can admit it's a problem. But I feel like we don't know. It's like I said, it's grown so fast. In the past 10 years, technology and social media has just grown exponentially. And it's now become like my new normal. I can't even speak for the kids that were born in the past 5 to 10 years, but it's my new normal where I wake up in the morning, the first thing I go for is my phone. Go to bed at night, the first thing I go for is the last thing I put down is my phone. And it's always within arm's length of me, my phone, technology, stimuli, always there. But I think if I had to use an analogy for social media and technology and the rapid growth of it all, I would say it's like a teenager, with a growth spurt. And it's a little clumsy at first, it doesn't know how, his or her body parts kind of work just yet. and puberty hits. It's like, oh, what's all this hormones and everything, and oh, look at their girls now, I like them, oh, they're boys, I like those boys. It's like, it's just so much. But I think once we get past that phase, and continue to have conversations like this about social media, then I'm a pragmatic, optimist. I believe we can overcome it. How we can do
Right.
that, I have no idea.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I went, I guess, so dark on the other side of it and said to our own peril was that we have actually seen it manifest itself
True.
in ways of tragedy. And so I'm not saying that the entire experiment is going to be just this terrible, uncontrollable, mass suicide, mass anxiety experiment. However, there have been negative repercussions that have come, I think, that can be directly attributed to the social media experiment, because we didn't know what we were getting into. And it's not even necessarily even social media specifically. It's just the cell phone, right?
Mm.
Like, your cell phone is not, you don't just use it to make phone calls or text anymore. That cell phone is it's a $1,000 laptop that has access to an operating system. You can do more things with your current cell phone than you have now, than the technology the antiquated technology that they used, 40 years ago when they were 50 years ago when they were landing on the moon, right? So it's like that.
That's scary to even think
So
about.
it's exactly, and so that's what I'm saying. I guess it's just, we don't know how powerful it is, or like I said, for some people, I think if you look at the top executives for a lot of these technology companies in Silicon Valley and the West Coast, they don't let their kids have these types of smartphones, because they know that they are designed to be addictive. They're designed to grab hold of you. Like you said, it's the first thing you look at when you wake up in the morning, because it's probably in your bed with you when you go to sleep at night. And I'm not saying you, Nelson, I'm saying the proverbial you, humanity, right? I would say, particularly at least in the United States, I would say the majority of people probably have their cell phone right next to their bed at night. It's the last thing they see before they go to sleep. It's the first thing they see when they wake up. And that can be a depressing thing, especially and again, to talk about the news cycle and the media. It can be a depressing thing at 11 o'clock at night before you go to bed to read about all of the atrocities that are taking place globally.
Yep.
Depending on what type of news cycle you follow, and it can be damning to your health if at 6 o'clock in the morning when you wake up, you're right back on it, and it's like, okay, well, what's trending on Twitter? Who posted what on Facebook? And you just start reading these stories, and it's just so again, I use the word peril because I think, yes, technology has done absolutely fantastic things and amazing things, and will continue to progress. My fear is that on the spectrum of it's progressing in a good direction and it's progressing in a bad direction with negative effects and positive effects, I think they're both moving at incredible rates. I think it's moving toward progress at a very fast rate, and I think it's also moving toward detriment at an equally fast rate as well. And so I guess,
what has to give?
So what has to give, right? So that's for us to decide how much power do we let these pieces of technology have over us, have over our kids, have over, our core group of people that we, want to hang out with even, it's
forgive me if I sound distracted. I forgot to upgrade my Zoom so that way we can go past 40 minutes. So, if I was trying to upgrade while I was talking to you, but right now we have about 7 minutes. If for some reason it cuts off after 7 minutes, I'll just get another link and we'll just resume the conversation for another 40 minutes. And then after we're done today, I will upgrade. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, you got to upgrade your Zoom. You can have, see, that's part of the thing too, because it's incentivized social media is incentivized. So, for example, last night I was on my phone. I was playing solitaire, right? Before I go to bed, playing solitaire. And as I was playing solitaire, between games, there will be these ads that pop up. And one of the ads was for Better Men app. It's a Better Men app. And it breaks down exercise. I don't know how they realized I was trying to get in better shape. Somehow they must have got my data from somewhere. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
they got my data and they started giving me the same ads over and over and over again. By the sixth time, I clicked on the ad so I could go to the app. And I thought, man, this is a cool app. I can try this as a way to kind of keep track of my progress. And I clicked on the app and I filled out all the information as it went along. It was like 7 or 8 slides. Entered my information, BMI, weight, height, all that good stuff. And at the end, there was now pay $12 for monthly thing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not going to do this. But it's everywhere we go. We're incentivized to have social media. We're incentivized sometimes monetarily, sometimes we're incentivized likes. And you mentioned the dopamine effect, how because we don't know that we're addicts, we don't think it's a problem. But I think the more we have these adverse effects, like you had mentioned, the suicide rates, the anxiety, the depression, the more that is prevalent and we have more data on it, because it's still a fairly new thing, the social media thing. The more we have data on it, the more we can understand it and then hopefully start to address it. But I fear, because of the incentive behind this machine, I fear that greed might, even though I'm optimistic, I fear that greed might prevail. I hope not, but I fear it might be the case.
I think you could make the case that it already has prevailed, and that companies like Facebook, they frankly don't care that the negative effects that they're having on individuals. It's make as much money as they possibly can, and Facebook is one that's, their business model is uniquely, they're almost monopolistic in the sense that they've got the market on the social media trend, and their closest, so they acquired Instagram. So
Yes.
Facebook now owns Instagram, and there really isn't a close competitor right now, I think, to the monopoly that Facebook currently is.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they generate money, though, is they can generate it on two fronts. So they get it from the ad revenue, just from regular general ad revenue for advertisers who want to just do business with Facebook, and then they will kind of randomly pop up on people's pages, and then based on whatever ads you're clicking on, when it's on your page. So if you see 50 ads on a given session on Facebook, if you click on 8 of those ads, Facebook can now compile that data. They'll now know, okay, well, you clicked on these 8, not these 42. And then they take that data and they'll sell it back to the advertisers, to the ones that you clicked on, and they make money twofold. So they're making money from the advertisers to initially post on their service, and then they're making money from Facebook's making money because they're selling that data back, and they're saying that this particular demographic or this particular geographic location or this particular sect of people, they basically compile all that data, and they are just selling it back to the advertisers, saying, hey, look, this is working, and this isn't working. We posted this ad X number of times on all of these different demographics, and they can just run the analyses on it and say, look, and it's information for the advertisers too, because, okay, well, now they have 42 ways not to advertise to a certain demographic, and they can tailor it and make it more specific. And so it's a never ending cycle that, and they just continue to make money, and they continue to just take your data, and you freely give it to them, right? Like there's a terms of service that there's a terms of service that you sign on to when you sign up for a Facebook, and only lawyers have read those documents, right? Like
You know how extensive they are.
Right. No honest Facebook consumer can honestly say, yeah, I've read verbatim the terms of service that I'm signing on to. I would find it hard to believe that there is one, but again,
there's a psychology to that. There's a psychology to giving given us, because when you see those disclaimers, the documents say, okay, now read all the way to the end and sign this. There's a psychology behind that. It's just like, let's overwhelm them with the most right now, because we know based off studies that most 99.99999% of people will just be like, whatever. So I'll just sign away my whatever, give away their rights. We have less than a minute, so let's see. If it does end, by the way, I will resume this idea I had, and the idea is, I don't know if it's in the Bible. I should know this, but see, the love of money is the root of all evil. Is that a Bible passage?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
You know what book? I have to research that. But
I don't. I actually have I can look it up for you.
okay, so with the love of money is the root of all evil, I believe it's playing out right in front of us. It's very easy for us to say, oh man, we need to do good in the world. We need to be kind to our brothers and sisters. But I believe that I almost feel like God is sitting back and looking at us and saying, well, see, I told you it's not really me doing this to you. It's you doing it to yourselves. There's greed. And, love of money comes in different forms. There's power, there's control, there's influence, there's actual paper, there's land, or there's ownership. Money comes in different forms. And I think once the revenue starts coming in with Facebook and with Instagram and social media, it's easy to see that and want to hoard more and control more and get more power. And you know the effect it's having on the people. You know that, you can see it. The studies are out there. But this money, this greed is just prevalent. And we see it all over the world right now. Like, people, we have so much at our disposal. And when I say all over the world, I'm actually speaking to myself too, in the sense that, for example, we live in America. We are doing really well, regardless of how bad you're doing in this country. We're doing really well compared to the rest of the world. Trust me, I'm from a third world country. I know. I believe I was talking about the love of money being the root of all evil. What was that Bible verse?
So it's in 1 Timothy 6 verse 10. And so it says, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And that's the New International Version. And it's a wildly misquoted Bible verse, actually, because a lot of people would like to quote it and say that money is the root of all evil, but the operative word really is the love of money. And when it takes over your life and it consumes your life, this is the subsequent action that follows from it. Because it's not an evil or negative or terrible thing to have money. In fact, there are several points in the Bible that you could look to as injunctions, that if you have enough to help those who can't help themselves, help the widow, help the poor, help the children, help people who can't help themselves, well, you can't do that if you're also destitute. And so there's, like I said, it's a misquoted verse that I've heard misquoted more times than I can count. But when the money becomes the more important thing above all else, that's when it can lead to the destruction.
Yeah. The love of the money, not so much the money itself. I think that's what the tithe was. Wasn't the tithe, I could be wrong, explained in the sense that if you had a farm and you harvested your farm, you left certain sections of the farm so the poor come and glean off that. And that was supposed to be what the tithe represented. And then you would take a certain portion to the priests, because they were a big staple of, I guess, the Israelite community. I'm probably not well versed in this, but I'm guessing that's the premise of that. And at some point, we've lost that idea of living a little bit for everyone else, so that who are maybe born into a poor neighborhood, sick, afflicted, whatever, to have enough for themselves. We then, the love of this money has led us to the point where we want 100% of it for ourselves. And we don't leave enough for charity, which goes with righteousness. We don't leave enough for charity, and we just want to hoard it all to ourselves. And I think whenever I hear that verse, it reminds me of a time in my life when I made a pivot from being the person I used to be, who was someone that saw a certain population a certain way, to who I am now, and I'll explain. So my band and I, this was a while ago, and I won't mention who was in my band then, but I too was convicted by this. I don't know about their experiences, but my band and I, not the band I have right now, FYI, went to a place in Baltimore City we might probably know very well called Lexington Market.
Mm.
And this was Lexington Market 15 years ago, not now, right? 10, 15 years ago, I think. And so we had to play a show there. And the show was part of a way of giving back to the community where you have local performers come and play at the Lexington Market and to bring some kind of culture and, culture to the city. Cool. I thought it was a good idea. So I volunteered my band and I to go play. It was a paid gig, by the way, but not the best paid, but it was still a paid gig. So we got there, and I remember thinking to myself as soon as I walked there, what am I doing here? Um, there were homeless people everywhere. It stunk of desperation, despair, urine, drugs, fear, everything. It just stunk of that. So my band and I walked in, and we were performing in this epicenter of the Lexington Market, excuse me. And where we were, the stage was on the first level, but at the second level there was like a little veranda where people could kind of look over and watch the performance at the same time, right? So you getting the picture so far?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, what are we doing here? And they're all looking at us like you're all not supposed to be here. You're looking at us strange, and we're looking at them strange too. So we set up, and then we start to play, and I'm watching, just being very aware of where my guitar is, my guitar stand is, where my guitar cases are, where all my merchandise is. I'm just being very aware, very hyper aware, because I felt very threatened by this environment, because I didn't know. And then I saw some gentleman at the veranda above us just kind of throw something on the stage. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's about to go down. And I looked on the floor on the stage, and I looked, and it was a crumpled up dollar bill. Right? So I'll try not to cry because, this really convicts me. So I saw a crumpled up dollar bill. I'm like, wow, I didn't think that man had a dollar bill to his name. And we just threw it because I was just being my regular self. Even though I was very hyper aware, I was still playing to the crowd and singing for them. And then another person threw a dollar bill. Now, mind you, all around us is desperation. I know they're desperate. I know they were begging us for food on the way in, but they were throwing money on stage. And I kid you not, Jacob, by the time we're done playing that show, the stage was covered with money. And the place where there's supposed to be desperation and lack is covered with money. Just on the stage, they were just giving us tips because I guess they were so appreciative of the music and the intention behind the music. So I was like, whoa, I can do this. I cannot take this money out of this community. So I took the money, rounded up all the cash. Now, I wasn't the only performer on stage, so it wasn't my right to say I'm going to give this money back. I said, hey, we're going to split this money X amount of ways, but I plan on giving mine back to the community somehow, some way. And I was very disappointed that some of the band members chose not to. And like I said, I'm not going to mention names, and it's a long time ago, but I won't go into that. It's irrelevant. The point of the story is this, that the band was way better off than most of the people that threw the money in that stage. I was way better off than most of them that threw money on that stage in terms of where we were, what we're living, how much we had in our bank accounts. But the fact that they were willing to give from a place of lack, their last, like the widow, the last, piece of bread for the prophet. I'm not calling myself a prophet, but the last piece that they had, they were willing to give that. Whereas I've played a lot of shows, private parties for a million years, and they are not half as generous as those people. Convicted me that day. And I realized the problem with the world is not what God has provided the world. God has provided us with enough riches to last every man 20 times over, even more. The problem with the world is the greed that we have. And I saw God's heart in the display of charity from homeless and desperate people that day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a touching story. I don't have a platitude or a story like that to tell, but I mean I can speak again, like you had said, you sort of had made determinations about those people prior to even playing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You had made sort of ideas about them in your mind, and everybody does it, right?
True.
If any, everybody does that. I mean, I certainly didn't grow up wealthy by any stretch of the imagination,
I thought you
but
did.
not at all, not at all. No, I didn't grow up wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but we didn't grow up at the poverty line either. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because you would hear these expressions, and it's sort of akin to, for the love of money is the root of all evil. Another, derivation of that expression is, you always hear money changes people,
Mm.
right? You always hear, money changes people, but nobody ever wants to look at that sort of introspectively and say, well, no, money changes me. And even though, like I said, I didn't grow up wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination now, but I'm above the global poverty line. I'm above the poverty line as it relates to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I can pay my mortgage on time with relative ease, and so I'm not constantly behind the eight ball as it relates to money, and so so that's not wealth, or exorbitant wealth by any rational definition of the word, as at least as it relates to the United States. But a vast majority of countries would look at
Yeah.
what I make in a day or in a week or over the course of 2 weeks and think, you've got to be kidding me.
Yep.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but even growing up in the situations that I grew up in, there's the tendency to look at people who have less than you
Mm-hmm.
and make those judgments about them. Like, well, they got themselves in that situation by poor choices or bad lifestyle, or, fill in the blank with
Mm-hmm.
whatever you would want to say about them. But we don't have any idea
So true.
for the overwhelming majority of them, how they got to the situations in which they arrived. And so it's so easy to look at somebody on the street corner asking for money, or maybe they're not even that far off, but you just see somebody who's clearly in maybe not abject poverty, but they are struggling.
Yep.
And it wouldn't be that much to go buy that person lunch or dinner or give them a couple of bucks. And so, but money does change people, and money can change me, because again, with respect to someone like that, I would be viewed as wealthy.
Yeah.
And so I have to constantly check myself too and think, okay, well, now wait a minute. You can't write the narrative for that person's life for them. They arrived at that certain circumstance some way, somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a story by just personal carelessness or not, they had life experiences that got them there, and
Or they were born into it.
or they were born into it. And again,
Yeah.
the life experience could be the biological lottery pool that they lost. And
True.
right, I mean, like
Sure.
you and I didn't choose our parents. We didn't choose our environmental factors that we were born into. We didn't choose the DNA that makes us up, or the house that we grew up in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there, by the grace of biology, go I. And
Exactly.
and
Grace of biology. I like that. You just made that up right now?
No, I've heard. I can't. I don't want to plagiarize.
Okay.
So now there's he's a philosopher and a neuroscientist that I'm a huge fan of. His name is Sam Harris. I don't know if you've.
I do listen to Sam Harris sometimes.
Yeah. So I think he's a brilliant guy, and he talks about free will a lot. And maybe we're not going to get into that on this particular episode, but it's definitely a topic I think that would be worth pursuing. He wrote a book on free will. I read it, and it really makes you think, because we have this perception
Mm.
of free will. I'm the author of my thoughts. I'm the author of my choices. And again, he's a neuroscientist, and so he basically maps this all the way down to the brain.
Mm.
But
Is he
right,
an
I mean,
atheist, or is he?
he is. He is.
Okay.
He absolutely is. He is that. And so so yes, there. I would obviously have theological disagreements with him at that level, but that doesn't take away from just the brilliance of this human being.
The reason why I asked, sorry to interrupt you. The reason why I asked that question was because that's one of the things that I really, really like about you. Because we're very similar in that sense, where I'm curious about the world. I'm curious about people who are perceived as smart around us. I'm not easily swayed, but I like to hear the argument for and pro and con for what I believe, and then weigh it against the word, like the word says. But I like that about you because I think it's a book you even gave me. I went halfway and I stopped. Chris Kresser book about diet.
Oh yeah.
I still have your book, by the way.
Yeah.
But I had it.
Unconventional Care by Chris
Yes.
Kresser.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know how someone borrows your book for a long time and after a while it becomes theirs just because she forgot about the book?
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off, man. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But no, like, I guess just to go back to that point, again, the phrase that I stole from Sam Harris, admittedly, I stole it. But I think it's a very apropos saying. You and I didn't get to not be born Uday Hussein, right? We weren't born to Saddam Hussein in the Middle East in the mid 80s. I mean, so again, we are a collection of cells. The fact that, I know you weren't born here in America, but you live here in America now. And, we represent, the United States represents, I think, roughly 5% of the global population. Wow. And so I can say I hit the biological lottery pool because I wasn't born in a third world country. I wasn't born to, parents, they have their issues, but like everybody does. But I wasn't born to parents who didn't care about my well-being and wanted to raise me in with certain morals and standards and a code of ethics, right? And so where the global population is 7.6-ish billion people, right? So, if you're born in this country today, or even in the year that I was born 34 years ago, you're luckier than most, right?
Yes.
And again, we had no say in that. I had absolutely no say in that. And it's been something that, I've come to recognize relatively recently, probably in the last 8 to 10 years. It took me a long time to sort of realize that. And because it's easy to look at somebody who's not as well off and say, well, why don't you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps? And if they're not wearing a pair of boots with straps to pick themselves up by, it makes it impossible. And so, your story about, the crowd that you were playing in front of in a clearly less well-to-do environment than we're typically used to, led me down that path.
No, it's interesting. You said that if you live in the United States, you're better than 95% of the world. Like in terms of hitting the biological lottery, we're doing really good here, and it's very easy to ascribe some kind of superiority complex to something we had no control over, to saying because I was born into this and I've had this luxury of life, of politics, of wealth, of climate, whatever the case may be, that makes me superior to you as another human being. And that fallacy leads to a lot of World War I's and twos and threes, and look at history, let it be a great reminder. And that incident that I experienced that day at the Lexington Market, it was almost like God was trying to impress upon me something that I have to be aware within myself, that was a nature that had to die and kill. If I
Mm.
did not kill that nature, I will have continued with my negative stereotypes, and I will have perpetuated that to people I met further down the line. God forbid. And it's funny, right after that experience, literally a week and a half, 2 weeks after that, I had a similar experience again with, it's almost like I didn't get the point, even though I was moved by that. It was more, I was moved by the experience, right? I don't think it brought true transformational change until it happened again. And this time I was on Pratt Street. I was on Pratt Street in the Inner Harbor. And I was outside under a tent playing. And I was playing for like a group of corporate people outside. It was nice, very quaint setup. And I'm playing again. This is a week and a half. I have forgotten about my experience at Lexington Market. Whenever I thought about the experience, it was more like, oh, that was a cool, moving moment. But here I am again playing in front of these corporate people. And this particular show, I had a tip jar, right? I had a tip jar. And these people who were working in these high-rise buildings came and sat down, watched, and left. And I would say maybe a handful put some money in the tip jar. And then I saw this. They looked homeless. They looked rough. They looked like, very unkempt. I can't assume if they were homeless or not, but they looked rough.
Mm.
I saw two of them, man and woman. They were just arguing passionately to my left, and I'm looking at them. Obviously, now being more hyper aware again. I wasn't as hyper aware of people in suits and ties. They were not threatening to me. But when I saw this man and woman over there, I was very hyper aware now, and they were just speaking passionately, not arguing, speaking passionately to each other. So I'm like, what are they talking about? And then eventually one of them breaks away from the other and walks towards me. I'm like, oh, here we go. There's money in the tip jar. I could care less about the money. If you want to take it, take it. I'm not. If you really need it, go ahead and take it. That was my thinking. And this person comes in and puts the hand in the tip jar and puts some money in there. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, this is not happening to me 2 weeks in a row. So I forget who was there. I think my friend Louis was there. I can ask him to confirm this, but I just stopped playing mid-song, put my guitar down, chased after the guy, and said, no, you cannot give me this money. So I took the money in the tip jar and gave it to them. Now, I didn't do anything good. Come to find out that they were arguing about if they should give me that dollar, because that was the last dollar they had to spend that day. And they enjoyed the music so much that they chose to give me that dollar. I was so convicted, man.
Mm.
I was broken for about a week. I'm like, here I am judging these people twice in 2 weeks, judging them because of the way they look, the way they present, and yet God has used them to display kindness to me. So ever since then, I've learned to, even if the person comes out right and is trying to take away my value, I've learned to see them the way God sees them, as someone worthy of never taking away their value. So that those two experiences definitely pivoted my ideology and my philosophy of life and the way I view people. So now, if I'm in front of millionaires and billionaires and having a good time with them, I'm not going to judge them if they choose to be generous or not. And if I'm in front of the homeless guy or lady tomorrow, I'm not going to judge them whether they choose to be generous or not. I'm just going to be generous to them because God has been generous to me. I'll
Mm-hmm.
choose to be generous to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, by the grace of biology, I like that. That's my new favorite saying. I'm going to start by the.
Again, I cannot take credit for it, but when I heard him say that, it was during a conversation. He and Jordan Peterson,
Oh
who
God.
I know you also are a fan of his, but they had a series of conversations in I want to say Vancouver,
Hmm.
over the course of 2 or 4 nights. I want to say they probably over the course of 2 nights, and they had Brett Weinstein, who I don't know if you're familiar with who he
I know the
is.
name.
Yes, he's an evolutionary biologist. He's a just highly intelligent person that I read and follow, and and just find to be a fascinating individual. And so he sort of, the conversation between Peterson and Harris was sort of framed and posed as a debate. You know, Peterson was on one side and he was pushing issues, and Harris was on one and he was pushing issues, but they were really just having a conversation as well. And it's well worth your time to go.
I put it down already to look at.
Go check it out. It's 2 nights. I think one is about 2 hours. One is about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But the level of conversation that the two of them are able to engage in is just fascinating. And Brett is there sort of, you know, almost aloof, just kind of trying to pick his moments as to when it's right for him to sort of engage. But he does such a fantastic job. You know, he comes in so infrequently, but when he does, man, it's so sharp. And he really kind of holds both of their feet to the fire on certain issues. Because the second night, actually, they open it up with Brett basically telling them, you know, the first night of the conversation was absolutely fantastic. And then the second night he says, you know, I'm going to challenge both of you. I want you to steel man the other person's argument, right? Because it's a common tactic in debates and conversations is to take one tiny sentence or phrase that somebody says, and you completely caricature that position and project something on them that is completely false. And that's called straw manning an argument. And straw manning an argument. Straw man. Okay. So when you do that, it's a very sleight of hand move that you can use in debate tactics, where somebody says one thing. I could say, well, here's an example. I would prefer not to see Donald Trump as president. The straw man to that is, well, then clearly you must be a progressive left, radical leaning Democrat who is excited about Joe Biden.
I see this very often in CNN and Fox.
Well, right. I mean, those are the two poster childs for it, right? Okay. And so, but what Brett does with the two of them, because they had laid out very, very complex and deep arguments and conversations, and he makes the two of them steel man each other's position to the point that they understand where the other one's coming from completely, and they know right on where the argument is headed and where the conversation is headed. And you know, Brett had said, okay, well, you've now proven, you know, you guys understand where each other are coming from, and if you regress to the mean and you regress from understanding the position and you start to straw man one another, I'm going to call you out on it and you're going to look really foolish. And so I just thought that was an incredibly useful tactic that you just don't see, right? Because like you said, that is MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, right? You know what you're getting when you tune into them, right? So Fox News very, very rarely is going to say anything even remotely negative about Trump. CNN and MSNBC are going to very rarely, you know, say anything it's complimentary of him, right? And so they're not news, right? I mean, Fox News is not even a news network. I mean, they're listed as entertainment, and you know,
look who we have in the White House. He's an entertainer. It was
he's something.
But I'm not saying that as a
I get it.
I'm saying that as a matter of fact, is an entertainer, and
he is.
So let me just run this by you again. So straw manning is caricaturing someone's point of view, and steel manning is arguing for their point of view. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So to steel man somebody's argument really is to just lay out their position in terms that they agree to, and that it basically shows that you fully understand where it is that they're coming from, and then you don't attack based on something that's false about the argument that they set forth. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I think it's one of the principles in I forget the author's name. I should know this. I'm still reading the book, but it's one of the principles in How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? I don't know if you read the book, but it's about basically.
Oh, Carnegie, right?
Yeah, Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie.
I think it's Dale Carnegie.
I think Dale Carnegie. Yeah.
The book is upstairs. Actually, it's in my phone. I lied. It's my Kindle on my phone.
Oh, nice.
But in my phone, everything is in my phone. But
Same here.
it's about basically before you try to to argue against someone's point of view, try to first understand where they're coming from. And that's one of the principles there, because a lot of people will let their guard down if they know you actually know what they're talking about. You've considered what their points of views, and then you present yours. But people will not do that if what you're doing first of all is straw manning their points of views. They're just going to be like, okay, I guess that's your point of view, and this is my point of view, and let's go. Let's see who can shout the other one down louder.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly, and that's what it reduces to. And so there's another saying that kind of ties right to that, and it's, tell the person what you think they think until they think you've done an adequate job of summarizing their position. And so once you get to that ground where, okay, I can see your point, I know where you're coming from, and I fully understand it to the degree that I'm supposed to understand it, at least as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can provide, if there is one, I can provide a counterfactual. I can provide a counter argument to it, rather than, let's just talk in circles, and again, I'm going to steal a phrase from, what's that?
Sam Harris again?
No, it's Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot too.
Okay.
And he calls it a positive feedback loop, right? Where it's just, you say something that is on the right side, I say something that's on the left side. Well, that gets you upset. So you're going to say something that's on the right, even more loud, more defensive of your argument. I'm going to get more defensive of mine. And so he calls them positive feedback loops, because essentially, we drive farther and farther and farther apart. And you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm not listening to what you're saying. We just know that we're disagreeing with one another. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I don't care what you say. I just want to make you look bad by arguing against your position. And you don't care what I say. You just want to make me look bad by arguing against my position. And it's just, it's such a disgusting way to have conversations. And because honestly, at the end of the day, they're not conversations, right? You are trying to just chop the person off of the knees, or dehumanize them, or just strip them from any type of worth. So you can walk away and think, I felt better about myself about that.
Yeah, it's not a conversation. It's just two people presenting their monologues. And it just so happens their monologues are polarizing. And that's just what it ends up being. But I think at the core of that is, I can speak for myself, at the core of that is an ego that overcomes you especially when there's an audience watching. And sometimes the audience is an audience of one, the person that is opposing your view. When there's an audience watching, that ego creeps up. It's like, you cannot be wrong. You cannot look wrong here. You have to argue your point of view. And most times the points of views we are espousing are not well researched. And, because it could just be lay conversation about whatever. And I find myself, I'll be talking and I'll be arguing a point of view that I'm not very well researched on. I'm supposed to just stop in and understanding what the other person is saying. But the older I've gotten, the more times I've killed that ego, because the ego will never go away, but it'll keep bubbling up. You just got to keep suppressing it. And hopefully over time, like, I believe I'm getting better at suppressing it, but it creeps up, and it wants the desire to be right. The desire to not be shamed, especially in public spaces, is so strong, that you argue, even if you're wrong. So I found just in my life, especially, for example, on stage, when I'm playing, I find this worked really, really well with hecklers, because a heckler stating his or her point of view, right? I know it sounds weird to say it that way, but they have something they strongly want to say, and they want to say it now, and they want to say it loudly and as brashly as they can say it. And I have found this to be a matter of fact. Whenever someone is at my show and they're heckling or they're doing something I perceive to be disruptive, I just literally stop whatever it is I'm doing. And so I give them the floor. What do you need to say? Okay. All right. Um, okay. Do you want me to? I want you to play Freebird. I'm like, I don't know that song. I'm so sorry. And I'll let them talk.
Right.
And to the third party observers, like, why are you letting this person talk? I'm like, no, they just want to be heard. Then once they are heard, they then become my biggest allies. If they're not drunk, of course, they become my biggest allies for the rest of the show because I've given them the thing everyone desires is to be heard, for their points of views to be heard, not to be validated, but just to be heard. And
Hmm.
once you can hear their points of view, then you can go as far as to validate or disproving their points of views based off good conversation and good conversation skills. Like, okay, I see your point of view, and I see your point of view from all these different angles. Can I present mine now? And they're more open to that at that point. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, on a more lighter note, what are you watching these days? Do you watch a lot of TV?
I lead a boring life. I do not watch a lot of television. I will be
Okay,
perfectly honest. No.
good for you.
So no, I really I enjoy listening to podcasts or watching podcasts on YouTube, and yeah, I'm not there's I don't know even right now that there's one. Ozark is one that I'm
Okay,
really into, and that's
Netflix, right?
on Netflix. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's set to have its fourth season come out. But no, I don't have any go-to television shows, to be
Mm.
perfectly honest. What about
Yeah.
you?
Uh, I like a lot of things that are on TV. So I'm a big sports guy. So I'm a big MMA and soccer guy. So they can consume my week if I let it. So I'm a big Arsenal fan. It's a soccer team,
Hmm.
and I love mixed martial arts. And I think that was the only that's the first sport to open up in the United States after
Yep.
the MMA UFC. So I watched that. But I was telling you, in the back end before we clicked record on this, that I just got into watching the one of my favorite old shows. It's no longer on TV right now, but it's on I believe Netflix or one of those streaming sites. It's called The Mentalist.
Hmm.
And I've always been drawn, like people like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and Ravi Zacharias, may his soul rest in peace. All
Hmm.
those academics of our time that can reason and almost like sway public opinion based with the ebb and flow of their words. It's like a symphony. They can just make everyone dance to their beat. Even politicians to an extent. I've always been fascinated by people that can do that. And The Mentalist is about a character that is able to do that in a criminal sense, where he catches thieves and law breakers using his ability. I think Mentalist is being able to control someone's perception and behavior. Um, that's what a mentalist does.
Exactly. Yep.
So I'm fascinated by that kind of person that can do that, and I always wish I could do that myself. I think to an extent I'm a mentalist when it comes to music. Um, I have this God-given ability. I thank God. I have no clue how I do it, but I do it somehow. Where I walk into a room, I start playing. I can make you my friend really, really quickly. And I don't know how I do it. I just put on a big smile and start playing. And I guess that's a form of mentalism too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's definitely a natural gift that you can express over time, and you can get better at over time. But it's an incredibly hard thing, I would think. And this is speculative, but it's got to be an incredibly hard thing to teach.
mm,
There's got to be something that's innate in you that allows for those expressions to come out, and for you to for people to be receptive to you,
mm,
right?
yeah.
Because not everybody has that ability. I'm not one of those people.
But you're a drummer. Oh, well, you're all the way in the back.
Oh yeah, right, exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm in the the background of everything. I don't have a mic for obvious reasons, and but so yeah, so I can sort of express myself almost anonymously, because you can kind of hear the drums, but the drummer is never on the forefront of it, and so but there's almost a sense of power, and it commands almost power as a leader of a band, right? You're center stage, all eyes are on you, the lights are on you, and so people's sort of frame of mind is already on.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's the center, this guy's the leader. And then if you can own that, and if you know that going into it, and you can say, look, I know that X thousand number of people's eyes are going to be on me, and you can captivate them very quickly. And again, I'm speaking completely speculatively because I've never been the leader of a band or had the spotlight on me in that sense. But it seems, from an outsider looking in to what you're describing, it seems like if you can win that audience within the first couple of minutes, the next couple of hours that follow are almost easy.
Mm-hmm. It's easy.
Is that easier? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I had a TED talk about this where I talked about, how to win. What was it? How to win over an audience or how to win over a crowd. I forget what the title was, but yeah, it talked about how I kind of broke it down to 4 easy constructs, but I think it's way more than that. But those are the 4 constructs that I can tell for a fact that I use, that also are part of who I am. It's not something I have to manufacture. It's a part of who I am. And I didn't say this in the TED talk, but one of the main things I've always had this is just a genuine curiosity for the world. Like, I love people. I just want to know more about people. I find people fascinating. I find you fascinating. Like, like who is it? I guess it ties into the whole mentalist thing. Like, I want to know how people work, and it's no surprise now. My undergraduate study was psychology, because I like the way the mind works and what makes people tick and why they tick and how to affect that tick in a positive way or negative way. But it's just fascinating. But we'll probably dive into that some more in future episodes. But I think we're coming to a close with this one. How did you think this first one went?
Yeah. Are we still recording, or is this going to be
still recording? I just
you'll clean this up somehow, or I guess we have to bring it to a head at some point. But I thought the conversation was great. We didn't really come to the table with a set of topics or an agenda or anything like that. The conversation sort of just flowed. I do think, that, as I think we talked about this just even via text, as it progresses, I think sort of the agendas or the bullet points or whatever it is that we want to talk about on a given evening, we will sort of develop that as we go. Like I said, if we see a news story that we thought was interesting or something topical that happened or something that we read about, because I know that, it sounds like both of us are relatively avid readers. And so, I think that is kind of the way that this is going to evolve.
Love it, man. Well, thank you so much for saying yes again to doing this podcast with me. I appreciate you, brother. And I pray and hope and believe that this podcast will be a conduit for good and conduit for love and growth and progress. And if that can be the case, I mean, I'm speaking for me now, but I hope you echo the same sentiments. If that can be the case, great. But if not, at least we had a good time doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think the defining factor of, success for how this is going to go, I think it's going to be, whatever we make of it,
True.
And so I'm all in, man. I think it'll be a fun ride. So yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Well, this was the end of the Jacob and Nelson podcast. We don't even have like a little catchphrase we do at the end, but we'll figure that out if it does happen. Or maybe we'll never do that. Maybe that'll be cheesy.
Exactly.
Cheesy, so I'll go into cheesy mode real quick.
I'll leave that to you.
Oh yeah. Don't worry, I got enough for both of us.
Right.
But so we'll do this. So yeah, I'm going to say this now. So we'll have brand new content from the Jacob and Nelson podcast every Thursday at 6 p.m. That's when I can upload it, because I tried uploading on Monday at 8 a.m. It didn't work well for me. I'm like, why am I waking up this early to do this?
Oh, yeah.
So every Thursday at 6 p.m. we'll be releasing brand new content for the Jacob and Nelson podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We love you all, and God bless.
All righty.